The sound of the slap echoed across the pristine driveway like a gunshot. Marcus Williams felt the sting radiate across his cheek, his head snapping to the side from the force of the blow. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The grocery bags he'd been carrying crashed to the ground, oranges rolling across the concrete like scattered marbles. His 7-year-old daughter Amara stood frozen on their front porch, her mouth open in a silent scream. "That's what you people get for parking your trash in front of MY property," Preston Blackwood sneered, his face twisted with rage and something darker, something that had been festering beneath his expensive cologne and designer suits since the Williams family moved in 3 months ago. Marcus slowly turned his head back to face Preston. His jaw was clenched, so tight it could crack diamonds. Every muscle in his body had gone rigid, coiled like a spring ready to explode. His hands that had been trained to neutralize threats in 7 different ways, trembled at his sides. Not from fear. Never from fear. But from the monumental effort it took to keep those hands from doing what they'd been trained to do. Preston didn't see the danger. He never did. Wealthy people like him never looked close enough at people like Marcus to see what was really there. "You deaf as well as stupid?" Preston took a step closer, emboldened by Marcus's silence. "I said move your piece of junk car. This is Oakmont Hills, not some ghetto neighborhood you crawled out of." Marcus's eyes that had stared down insurgents in Kandahar, eyes that had seen things that would break most men, locked onto Preston's flushed face. Something flickered in those dark depths, something that made Preston's girlfriend Monica grab his arm with suddenly shaking hands. "Preston, let's just go inside," she whispered urgently. But Preston shook her off. He was too far gone, too drunk on his own perceived superiority and the 3 glasses of scotch he'd had at lunch. He raised his hand again. That's when Amara screamed, "Daddy, no." But she wasn't screaming at Preston. She was screaming at her father, because she'd seen what was happening to his face. The transformation. The shift from the gentle man who did her hair every morning into something else entirely. Something that, even at 7 years old, she instinctively knew was dangerous. Marcus's phone buzzed in his pocket. Once. Twice. 3 times. The emergency signal. His unit was being called up. And just like that, Preston Blackwood had picked the worst possible day to push the wrong man too far. 24 hours earlier, life in the Williams household had been perfectly normal. Marcus stood in the kitchen at 6 in the morning, his muscular frame bent over the stove as he flipped pancakes with the precision of a man who'd learned to find peace in small routines. The early morning sun streamed through the windows of their modest but comfortable home, casting golden light across the breakfast table where Amara sat coloring in her notebook. "Daddy, can we get a dog?" she asked for the 100th time that month. Marcus chuckled, sliding a perfectly golden pancake onto her plate. "Baby girl, we talked about this. When I'm home more regularly, okay? A dog needs attention and with my schedule." He didn't finish the sentence. He never did. Amara understood, even if she didn't like it. Her daddy was a soldier, a sergeant in the Army Rangers to be exact, and sometimes he had to go away. Sometimes for weeks. Sometimes for months. She'd learned not to ask too many questions about where he went or what he did. Morning, family. Sarah Williams appeared in the doorway, her nurse's scrubs already on, her beautiful face soft with sleep. She kissed Marcus's cheek, then Amara's head. "Another masterpiece breakfast, I see." "Only the best for my girls," Marcus replied, wrapping an arm around his wife's waist. They'd worked hard for this life. Scraped and saved for the down payment on this house in Oakmont Hills, a neighborhood that was definitely a stretch for their budget but offered good schools and safe streets. Sarah worked double shifts at County General Hospital. Marcus's military salary, combined with his contracting work during leave, barely covered the mortgage. But it was theirs. A piece of the American dream they'd fought for. "Did you see that man next door staring at us again yesterday?" Sarah asked quietly, pouring herself coffee. Marcus tensed slightly. "Preston Blackwood." "Yeah, I've noticed. He gives me the creeps. The way he looks at us when we're in the yard, like we're trespassing in our own home." "Some people can't handle change," Marcus said carefully. He'd dealt with men like Preston before, Men who saw the world as their personal kingdom, who believed certain people belonged in certain places. Just ignore him. We have every right to be here. But ignoring Preston Blackwood was proving harder than Marcus had anticipated. It had started small. Preston's gardeners accidentally blowing grass clippings onto the Williams driveway. His luxury cars parked just slightly over the property line. The complaints to the homeowners association about Marcus's 10-year-old Honda, claiming it lowered property values. Then came the comments. Loud enough to be heard, quiet enough to have deniability. There goes the neighborhood, Preston had said to his friend 2 weeks ago, standing in his driveway as Marcus returned from his morning run. Diversity hires, he'd muttered last week when Sarah drove past in her scrubs, clearly coming home from a night shift at the hospital. Marcus had swallowed it all. He'd been trained to endure worse than words. He had a family to protect, a home to keep. Getting into a confrontation with a wealthy neighbor wasn't worth it. But Preston Blackwood was about to learn that every man has a breaking point. And Marcus Williams, former Ranger, current Special Operations Reservist, a man who'd earned 3 Purple Hearts and a Bronze Star, was reaching his. The trouble started in earnest on a humid Saturday afternoon. Marcus was in the front yard, teaching Amara how to ride her new bicycle without training wheels. Her laughter filled the air each time she wobbled but stayed upright, her small face beaming with pride and determination. These were the moments Marcus lived for, the simple, precious hours of being just a dad, not a soldier. "You're doing great, baby girl. Keep pedaling," he called out, jogging alongside her. That's when Preston's cherry-red Tesla pulled into his driveway next door. The door swung open and Preston stepped out, dressed in golf attire that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly mortgage payment. His girlfriend Monica emerged from the passenger side, her designer sunglasses reflecting the afternoon sun. Preston's expression soured the moment he saw Marcus and Amara. "Could you keep that noise down?" Preston called across the perfectly manicured lawn. "Some of us are trying to relax." Marcus looked up, keeping his voice even. "She's just learning to ride her bike, man. We'll be done soon." "Soon is it now?" Preston snapped. "And maybe teach her to ride in a park, not in a neighborhood where people pay premium prices for peace and quiet." Amara had stopped pedaling, her smile fading. She looked at her father with confused eyes that broke Marcus's heart. She was too young to understand the real reason behind Preston's anger, but old enough to sense the hostility. "It's okay, sweetheart," Marcus said gently. "Let's take a water break." As they walked toward their house, Marcus heard Preston mutter to Monica, "Can you believe they let people like that by here? This used to be a respectable neighborhood." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he kept walking. Sarah appeared at the front door, having heard the exchange through the window. The look on her face told Marcus everything. She was tired of this too. Tired of making themselves smaller, quieter, less visible just to avoid conflict. "How long are we going to let him talk to us like that?" Sarah asked that evening after Mara was asleep. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. "I don't know, baby. I really don't know. But if I confront him, if things escalate, we're the ones who'll be painted as the problem. You know how this works." Sarah nodded, but the frustration in her eyes remained. They'd both seen it before. How quickly the narrative could shift, how easily they could become the villains in their own story simply by defending themselves. The next morning, Marcus woke to find his car had been keyed. Deep, deliberate scratches ran along both sides, spelling out a message that made his blood run cold. "Go home." He stood in the driveway at dawn, staring at the damage, his fists clenched. Through Preston's front window, he could see movement, a silhouette standing back from the glass, watching. Marcus pulled out his phone and documented everything. Photos from every angle. He'd learned in the military that evidence was everything. Then he filed a police report, though he had no illusions about what would come of it. No cameras had caught the act. No witnesses would come forward. The police officer who responded was professional but detached. "These neighborhood disputes can get messy," he said, as if random vandalism and racial slurs were just part of normal disagreements. "Maybe try talking to your neighbor. Work things out? Talk to Preston."
Right.
Marcus tried one last time to be the bigger man. That afternoon, he walked over to Preston's house and knocked on the door. He'd rehearsed what to say, calm, rational, man to man. Preston answered with a smirk already on his face. "We need to talk," Marcus began. "No, we don't," Preston interrupted. "But I'll tell you what you need to do. You need to pack up your little family and find somewhere more appropriate. Somewhere you actually belong." The words hung in the air like poison. Marcus felt something shift inside him, a line being crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. "This is my home," Marcus said quietly, his voice dropping to a register that made Preston unconsciously step back. "I've bled for this country. I've earned the right to live wherever I choose." Preston recovered quickly, his smirk returning. "Oh, playing the hero card? Let me tell you something, soldier boy." But Marcus had already turned and walked away. Because if he'd stayed one more second, if he'd heard one more word, his training would have taken over. And that was a line he couldn't cross. Not yet. Not until Preston pushed him one final time. The harassment escalated over the next 2 weeks like a slow-burning fuse. Preston filed a complaint with the Homeowners Association, claiming Marcus's aggressive behavior made him feel unsafe. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus, a decorated combat veteran being accused of aggression by a man who'd probably never thrown a punch in his privileged life. The HOA president, Mrs. Chun, was a fair woman who saw through Preston's complaints, but she had to follow protocol. She visited the Williams home on a Wednesday evening, apologetic but professional. "I'm sorry to bother you with this, Sergeant Williams," she said, sitting in their living room with a folder of documents. "Mr. Blackwood has filed 3 complaints this month. I have to investigate each one, even though—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Even though I suspect his motivations aren't entirely about HOA violations." Marcus appreciated her honesty. "What's he claiming now? That your car is parked illegally, that you play loud music at inappropriate hours, that your daughter's toys are left in the yard overnight creating an eyesore." Mrs. Chun sighed. "For the record, I've driven by your home multiple times. It's one of the best-maintained properties in the neighborhood. I think we both know what this is really about." After she left, Sarah found Marcus standing in Amara's doorway, watching their daughter sleep. "We could move," Sarah whispered. "Find somewhere else. Somewhere we don't have to deal with this." Marcus turned to her, and she saw something in his eyes she'd only seen once before, the day he'd returned from his second deployment, changed by whatever he'd experienced overseas. "No," he said firmly. "We're not running. We didn't do anything wrong. This is our home, and I'll be damned if some entitled racist is going to push us out of it." Sarah squeezed his hand. She knew that tone. Her husband was a patient man, a good man, but he was also a warrior. And warriors had limits. The breaking point came on a Friday afternoon. Marcus had just returned from the grocery store, his car loaded with bags for the weekend. He'd parked in front of his own house, not blocking anyone, not violating any rules, and was unloading the trunk when Preston's Tesla screeched into the driveway next door. Preston burst from his car like a man possessed, his face flushed red with anger, or maybe alcohol. Marcus could smell the scotch from 15 feet away. "How many times do I have to tell you people?" Preston stormed across the grass, invading Marcus's space. "Your piece of junk car is an eyesore. Every time I look out my window, I have to see it sitting there, reminding me that this neighborhood has gone to hell." Marcus set down the grocery bag he was holding, straightening to his full 6'2" height. "Preston, I'm parked in front of my own house. I'm not blocking anything. You're blocking my view. You're blocking my peace of mind. You're blocking—" Preston's voice was rising to a shout now, spittle flying from his lips. "You're blocking everything that made this neighborhood worth living in." Amara had come out onto the porch, drawn by the yelling. Marcus saw her small figure and felt his protective instincts kick into overdrive. "Lower your voice," Marcus said, his tone dropping to something cold and commanding, the voice he used to give orders in combat zones. "My daughter is right there." "I don't care about your daughter," Preston screamed, his face now inches from Marcus's. "I don't care about you. I don't care about your sob-story military service. All I care about is getting you out of my neighborhood. The world seemed to slow down. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat in his ears, steady and strong despite the adrenaline flooding his system. He could see the veins bulging in Preston's neck, the wild look in his eyes, the way his hand was raising up. And then it happened. The slap that would change everything. Preston's hand connected with Marcus's face, with a sharp crack that seemed to silence the entire neighborhood. Birds stopped chirping. The wind died down. Even the distant sound of traffic seemed to fade away. Marcus's head snapped to the side from the force. The grocery bags fell. The oranges rolled across the driveway. And somewhere deep inside Marcus Williams, something that had been carefully controlled, carefully managed, carefully locked away behind years of discipline and training, something primal and dangerous, began to wake up. Marcus's vision narrowed to a pinpoint, the world reducing to just him and the man who'd just struck him. His breathing slowed. His heart rate dropped. Every sense sharpened to razor clarity. This was the state his instructors at Fort Benning had called combat focus, that place where thought and action merged into pure instinct. He'd been in firefights in Afghanistan where he'd felt less activated than he did right now. Preston, emboldened by Marcus's stillness, mistook silence for weakness. "What are you going to do about it, huh?" Preston taunted, his breath reeking of expensive scotch and cheap hatred. "Going to cry? Going to run to your—" Marcus's hand shot up with blinding speed, catching Preston's wrist mid-gesture. The grip was iron, unyielding. Preston's eyes widened as he felt the crushing pressure, felt the raw strength in fingers that had climbed mountains, held rifles steady under fire, and dragged wounded brothers out of hell. "Daddy, no." Amara's scream cut through the red haze. That small voice, that precious, innocent voice, was the only thing that could have reached Marcus in that moment. He looked past Preston and saw his daughter's terrified face. Not terrified of Preston. Terrified of what she saw in her father's eyes. Marcus released Preston's wrist and stepped back, his hands dropping to his sides. Every muscle in his body trembled with the effort of restraint. He'd been seconds away from ending this, from using the dozens of ways he'd been trained to neutralize a threat. But Amara was watching. His baby girl was watching. Preston stumbled backward, clutching his wrist, his face pale. For the first time, he seemed to realize what he'd awakened. Monica had rushed out of their house and was pulling at Preston's arm, her voice high and panicked. "We're leaving. We're leaving right now." But Preston's ego wouldn't let him retreat completely. As Monica dragged him toward their door, he shouted back, "You put your hands on me. That's assault. I'm calling the police. I'm calling my lawyer. You're finished in this neighborhood, do you hear me? Finished." The door slammed behind them. Marcus stood alone in his driveway, surrounded by scattered groceries, his chest heaving. His phone buzzed insistently in his pocket, the emergency call-up signal from his unit. He pulled it out with shaking hands. Code red. "All personnel report immediately. Deployment brief at 0600 tomorrow." Of course. Of all the days, of all the moments. Sarah rushed out, having watched everything from the window. She wrapped her arms around Marcus, and he felt himself begin to return, the soldier receding, the husband and father re-emerging. "I almost lost it," he whispered against her hair. "Sarah, I almost—" "But you didn't," she said firmly. "You didn't. That's what matters." Amara approached cautiously. "Daddy, are you okay?" Marcus knelt down and pulled his daughter into a tight embrace. "I'm okay, baby girl."
"I'm sorry you had to see that."
"I'm so sorry." "That man is mean," Amara said matter-of-factly. "Why is he so mean to us? How do you explain racism to a 7-year-old? How do you tell your child that some people will hate her for the color of her skin, for existing in spaces they believe she doesn't belong? Some people are just mean, sweetheart," Marcus said finally. "But we don't let mean people make us mean too. Understand?" She nodded against his shoulder. That night, after Amara was in bed, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with Sarah, his deployment orders spread before him. 3 months minimum, he said quietly. Could be longer. And I'm leaving you here with him next door. We'll be fine, Sarah assured him, though her eyes betrayed her worry. I'll install the security cameras you've been wanting. Maybe stay with my sister for a few weeks. Marcus's jaw clenched. He hit me, Sarah. In front of our daughter. In front of her home. And now I have to leave, and he just gets away with it. The police report is filed. Mrs. Chen knows what happened. I already called her. And Marcus. Sarah took his hands in hers. You did the right thing. You showed Amara what real strength looks like. Not violence.
Control. Dignity.
But as Marcus lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Preston Blackwood had crossed a line, and men like him never stopped at just one victory. They pushed until they broke you, or you broke them. His phone lit up with a text from his commanding officer. Glad you're back in the game, Williams. We need you for this one. Marcus closed his eyes. Tomorrow he'd put on his uniform, become Sergeant Williams again, and ship out to whatever crisis required his particular skills. But a part of him would remain here, in this house, worried about his family and what Preston might do while he was gone. He didn't know it yet, but Preston Blackwood had made the worst miscalculation of his life. Because Marcus Williams wasn't just going away. He was going to one of the most dangerous regions in the world to do things that would either make him a hero or break him completely. And when he came back, if he came back, he would be different. The question was, would Preston Blackwood still be there waiting? Hey, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching this from. What city? What country? And tell me, have you ever dealt with a neighbor like Preston? What would you do in Marcus's situation? Would you have kept your cool, or would you have reacted differently? If you're enjoying this story and want to see what happens when Marcus returns, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter. And if you think someone you know needs to hear the story, share it with them. Trust me, what's coming next will blow your mind. Drop your thoughts in the comments and let's talk about it. This story is far from over.